My name is Frank Hester. I'm the CEO and founder of TPP. We're a software company based in the UK. We've been going about 25 years now. We supply software, clinical software for doctors and nurses, or an EMR. In the NHS, we support over 260,000 users, over 8,000 organisations across the NHS, managing 18,000 beds. We support GPs, hospitals, clinics, palliative care. We look after all the medical records for all the prisoners in England. We're also active in China, the Middle East. Right now we're exploring new opportunities in Africa, Southeast Asia and the Americas. We run a very, very large operation. We do more transactions per second than Visa, Amex, MasterCard combined across the world. More transactions than the London Stock Exchange. We do about 12,000 per second. We've got 110 million interoperability things with other systems every day. We look after 52 million patient records back in the UK. But today what I want to really talk about, it's actually that OBE that was mentioned there. I got the OBE from the Queen about 4 or 5 years ago, and it was for transforming the NHS. Now, some of you doctors and nurses will have worked in the NHS back in the UK. I know a lot of you trained there. And it's the 5th biggest employer in the world. And transformation of anything is hard. The transformation of the NHS, I was fairly proud to be part of that journey. So on any view, we've become a successful organisation over these 25 years. And sometimes when people are being nice to me, they say, "Oh, Frank, you must be some kind of visionary or some kind of genius." Whilst it's nice to hear those words and I enjoy the compliments, I don't think they're really true. I think they're all given with the gift of hindsight. And I'd like to walk you through my journey in IT. And I think walking through that journey will help us think about the future and what we need to be doing here in Southeast Asia and especially here in Malaysia. I'm quite old. So when I started working IT, I worked in a large chemicals company called ICI. It was the biggest chemicals company in England. But back in those days, if you wanted something printed out, there were a bunch of ladies in a very large room, all with typewriters. And I say ladies as sexist as it is, they were all ladies. And then there were a bunch of managers who were all men, and they would give the ladies notes and they would type them out in the typing pool. And whilst I was there, some of the ladies got computers and they were typing into computers. But there was no way those men were ever going to use a computer. It was beneath them to type on a computer. It was something that ladies did. Men didn't do it. It was fairly obvious to me at that point that this world was going to change. And I wouldn't say that that was particularly visionary or genius-like. But given that everybody my age could already use a computer and you could see these old men that they were just going to walk off the planet. And they might never use a computer, but they were about to become obsolete. So when I was about 14 years old, I learned to program computers. At that time, my mum and dad ran a plastering business. They helped build houses. The business mainly involved lifting bags of plaster and bags of cement. I became very familiar with this. And it was certainly very motivational for me to want to be a computer programmer rather than lifting bags of cement. They've been going for about 15, 20 years, something like that. They employed about 17 people in the business, and they had a modest income from it. But I could see that every week my mother and father spent about a day and a half doing administrative tasks, such as the payroll, calculating the VAT, and it took them quite a long time. And I realized, calculating the VAT, it wasn't that complicated. If we bought something for £100, the VAT on it at that time was 15%, so it was £1.50, so you had to record £100, £1.50 VAT, and £11.50 gross. But you had to do that hundreds and hundreds of times. And I thought, well, a computer's going to be able to help with this. So I managed to get hold of a computer. The computers weren't very advanced then. And I managed to create some boxes where my mum could type in just the net amount. And of course, I mean, it was a little bit before spreadsheets existed, but you can imagine it to be a rudimentary spreadsheet. And then I went on to do payroll, which involved adding the pay they had this week onto the gross pay that they'd had this year, and then calculating the tax on that, and then subtracting the national insurance, which is what they do in Britain. I'm sure you've got something that lots of things the government subtract here as well. Well, anyway, Mum was a bit nervous about me doing this, and she wasn't so sure. She was very worried that I would miscalculate the VAT or miscalculate the task. So she wasn't really that up for it, yeah? On the other hand, Dad was completely against it. He thought it was a complete waste of time and couldn't see how a computer had anything to do with carrying bags of cement and lifting boxes of nails and things. So anyway, I computerized their business, and what was about a day and a half's worth of administration every week was cut down to about 10, 15 minutes. Within a year, they were employing 50 people. Within another year, they were employing 100 people. And then a couple of years later, they were employing 200 people. Their modest incomes were transformed, and my mum and dad became millionaires. And I could see the power of IT, how it can transform the business. Profit is one way of describing it. But life just became easier for them. My mum got her life back. She wasn't tied to the business in the way that she was before. After I finished my degree, I went to work in a bank. And at that time, we were looking at trying to get rid of all the pieces of paper that were lying around the bank when the customers came in to get a mortgage or take out some sort of investment product. And the bank already had a very big computer. In those days, it was the size of a room, and it was looked after by many people just to keep it going. But we were looking at a new thing. It was called the PC. It was a little computer that sat on your desk. You'll be familiar with them now, but back in the day, they were a brand new thing. And there were many people from the IT department who felt that this was a waste of time and that the little computer could never replace the big computer in the big room. And it was a foolish experiment and would never work. Whereas to me, it was obvious, just from looking at it, that this was the thing that was going to take away the paper. Other people were very concerned about losing their jobs, about the change that was going to happen. But we rolled it out, and it was successful, and we were the first bank to do anything like this in the UK. We got rid of the paper. It became a much slicker experience for the customer. The customer was able to get offered a mortgage there and then, or be told which investment product they could have right there and then. And we didn't need to employ as many staff to do it. The bank became more profitable. The customers liked the bank more. So then, after a while, I enjoyed working at the bank, but I wanted to do something more fulfilling, so I turned my thoughts to healthcare. With a view to trying to make it slicker, trying to give a better patient experience. I'd had some personal experience. My dad had gone to A&E and they didn't have his medical record in the emergency department, and they gave him the wrong treatment. And it really struck me very profoundly. It wasn't that the doctors were being evil. The doctors and nurses were trying very hard. They just didn't have access to the information. And I felt very strongly that a computer could help with this. And then, my family wouldn't have been having to answer the same questions. What's my dad allergic to? What medication is he on? All the things that we're familiar with doctors asking us. But a bit more difficult if you're unconscious or you just can't remember. And I wanted to solve that particular problem. And I think it's much more common than we think. My mother, in her later years, went into hospital and they failed to record in the hospital the drugs that the GP had given her. And 2 weeks later, we were admitting her for end-of-life care until my sister realised that they'd forgotten to give her the right drugs. And again, not a particular error by the doctors and nurses. And unbelievably, our local hospital has taken out my sister Maria's appendix 3 times. 3 times. I mean, twice would have been enough, but the third time it was like, come on. And all of it because And I asked the surgeon who did it, I said, why? And he goes, well, it looked like appendicitis, Frank. And I was like, but didn't you look at the notes? He goes, well, it took too long to get the notes. So we decided to write a system that would join things up. We set off to do it, and we did. Very quickly, I would say, within about a year and a half, we would get reports from the emergency department saying that we were saving lives. We were making it better for the consultants in A&E because they could see what the GPs had written in the notes already. They could see what drugs the patients were on. They didn't have to ask the patients. It was a better patient experience. I remember we had a diabetes unit on the system, and this was a real moment in time. Normally when a GP refers to a consultant in the diabetes centre, they'd write a long letter saying, I've known this lady for 20 years. She's on these particular drugs. The reason I'm referring her to you is because her blood levels are up or down or whatever. This was almost just a text in the system, and it said HbA1c. And the consultant replied, lower warfarin. And at that moment, I knew we had it cracked. We were creating a slicker, better system. And I could see right there in the UK the power of IT again to transform the patient experience and the doctor experience, leading to better outcomes. Right now, I think it's fair to say my company believes we've got a world-class next-generation hospital system. We're working with KPJ, and it's a fairly straightforward task for us to implement that there. It's not really that much harder than the task I had as a teenage boy, computerizing my mother's and father's business. And those steps are fairly easy, and we will provide better functionality for the doctors and nurses, and we will provide a better patient experience. The hospital, KPJ, will run more efficiently. Doctors will be able to manage more patients, and KPJ will make more profit. And that's fairly straightforward. But when one thinks, what I'm more interested in is, how did I get to here? And where are we going from now? What lies in the future? And what's the most important thing we can look at right now? And I think sometimes I find it very helpful to contemplate the past. I spend a lot of time thinking and working out where I've gone wrong before or what I could have done better. And I want to invite you to look at this picture. Some of you may have seen this before. I used it in my TED Talk. For those of you who haven't seen my TED Talk, don't bother. But the lady on the right the young girl on the right is my mother. I think the picture's taken about late 1950s, maybe 1958. They're living there in the west of Ireland. They're very poor. They managed to find some shoes for this photograph, but I know that normally they didn't have shoes. They didn't have electricity. And they certainly didn't have running water in the taps. For drinking water, they had to take a bucket to the stream at the end of the farm and fill the bucket with water. Little do they know what's about to happen to them. The changes that are about to come. They know nothing at this moment, obviously, about the internet or smartphones or being able to watch more than one channel on the TV. And at this moment, they haven't even discovered colour photography. So there's quite a lot for them to experience. But in about 6 years from that photograph, my mother's going to give birth to me. And she's going to be living in England with her sisters. And she's going to have a remarkably different life. Now, I think our lives are about to become remarkably different for two reasons. I see two things on the horizon. One is the smartphone. And I don't think any of you are going to say that I'm a particular visionary or genius for saying smartphone. I think you all know the power of the smartphone. You all know how to book your own flights or hairdressing appointments, or how to access the biggest source of knowledge via Google in the world, It's all right there in your hands. I feel for healthcare, combining that with the patient record, allowing the patient to enter their own symptoms is going to be a real turning point for us and will be the way that we work in future. The other one is artificial intelligence. And I get that a lot of companies say they're doing it. In fact, you can't be an IT company these days without saying artificial intelligence. I think we're in rather a unique position in my company in that we have these 52 million patient records, which gives us true big data. And we've been working on artificial intelligence for about 4 years. And I'd like to talk about that because I think this is the biggest thing that's about to hit us. I think it's as powerful almost as penicillin and antibiotics. And some of you can feel it coming, some of you don't know. Some of you will be skeptical. I mean, and all of that's okay. My dad was very skeptical. It didn't stop me loving him. And some of you will be skeptical and I'll still love you. And it's fine. But it's coming. We started off with ovarian cancer. It's a very tricky one to spot in primary care. In the UK, the average GP in their 40-year career will see about 5 or 6 ladies with ovarian cancer. They're running 7-minute consultations. The chances of them missing it are very, very high indeed, unfortunately. We've now built some AI that 50% of the time can spot the ovarian cancer before the GP spots it. Why is that important? Because for ladies, the sooner you spot that ovarian cancer, the better your outcome is going to be. If we leave it too late, well then it can be too late. And that's been well received by GPs. We're not replacing the GPs. We're helping the GPs spot it. Doctors have told me, Frank, I find this really useful. I often worry on a weekend that maybe I've missed something. And it gives me great cause for concern. And this is reality. And in this photograph, that's my Auntie Kathleen down there, sitting, trying to look cute, sitting on the ground, my Auntie Teresa. And the young girl taking the photograph is my Auntie Nancy. And she died about 4 years ago of ovarian cancer, just 1 short year before we developed it. And I am absolutely confident that if we'd had that in place, she would be alive today. We've now done the same for bowel cancer, prostate cancer, and lung cancer. Then we got hit by COVID-19 and we used artificial intelligence because we were in a tremendous rush, especially at the start, to work out how this virus was spreading. So inside my own firm, we used it ourselves to work out how the virus was spreading, to analyze the doctor's notes, and we completed tasks that would have taken us about 3 months in a matter of days. And I think there will be some amongst you, as I've said, like my mother, who will be nervous, quite rightly. Like my mother was nervous about the VAT and the income tax, about artificial intelligence. What was it going to do? How exactly does it work? Just like the way my mother was nervous about a computer because she didn't know anything about computers. Whereas I just did know about them. And it wasn't that mysterious to me. And it's exactly the same with artificial intelligence. It's not going to take over the world and rise up like the Terminator. It's just going to sit there beside us. And there will be some of you, like my dad, there'll be doctors, surgeons in the room saying, what on earth has AI got to do with me performing surgery? And in many ways, he might be right. But it's coming. And it will help you. And it will transform. So what does that mean for Malaysia? And why are we here? I know why you're here. You live here. Sorry, why am I here? Apart from the beautiful food and fantastic climate. Well, certainly one of the reasons I'm here is one of my friends, Desi. I met him about 4 years. Are you here in the audience, Desi? We started really thinking about an EMR to go across Malaysia, and that's where we'll build, fundamentally, the best AI. Malaysia's got the perfect number of people, 33 million people. If there's about 10 million people, it's not really enough to do the big data for the AI, but 33 million is kind of the Goldilocks number. It's the perfect number for building AI. And I do think this is really important. I think hospitals like KPJ will want to work with the MOH so we can develop the AI together. We can develop a certain amount within KPJ, but we'll get much more with the MOH. And I think that's where we will see a new kind of healthcare being delivered with better outcomes for patients. Doctors will be less stressed because they've got this thing beside them helping them. Think of it perhaps like a spelling checker, yeah? I first used a spelling checker when I was 17, a long, long time ago. I thought it was fantastic. It knew all the words. I didn't have to use a dictionary anymore. But what's important in this context is I didn't go to bed that night thinking, oh dear, will the spelling checker take over my life? Will the spelling checker replace my brain? Will the spelling checker replace me? No, it's just a spelling checker. And I want you to think of the AI like that. So I'm looking forward to doing more of it. And I'm looking forward to working on it with you here in Malaysia. And that's going to involve universities. It's going to involve doctors. It's going to involve nurses. And it's going to involve IT companies. And I do believe that over the next 10 years, we'll transform Malaysia. And we'll see it happening first in KPJ. So watch what happens at KPJ. Not just the straightforward slickness. It'll be a better patient experience. Like, all that's easy. But when the AI comes in, that's where you'll see a remarkable difference. So, hello, Malaysia. I'm looking forward to the next 10 years. Thank you very much.